Okay. And look at everyone coming in. So great. Glad to see a lot of folks coming in here. We'll be on Facebook Live. We're just kind of letting the last folks kind of join us. I know there'll be some other ones coming in. And welcome to the Hoosier Birders Hour. I'm Brad Bumgardner, the Executive Director for Indiana Audubon. And this has been kind of a fun series that we've been doing this year, kind of exploring all things Indiana Audubon, birding in Indiana, all kinds of cool topics that you guys may have as well. And so it's a chance that we invite folks to bring in questions if you have them. We have a monthly Zoom as well as Facebook Live. So you have a couple opportunities there. And we have Whitney Yorger, our communications manager. She's on today and she's looking for some of your questions. She'll help share those as we get them. I was kind of thinking about this month and what's been going on. I realized that September kind of has gone by really quick. It's already in the tail end of it, but we've had a great month and I think of like great birding as well. And now we get to kind of end things off with this potential hurricane and rarity of birds that may be coming in. And I was out today, and it's hard to believe that October's almost here, and the sparrows are all about. And I saw Lincolns and white throats and white crowns, and they've been really kind of flooding into northern Indiana. If you haven't seen them yet, they're coming. Dare I even say the sin word? I saw the first junco too, just like a day or so ago. So winter's coming, but that reminded me that we do have a Sparrow ID workshop coming up in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today. It's kind of a two-part series. It's really cool. If you're into those all the little LBJs, little brown jobs, you can learn them all with Jeremiah Odin. And then the next day at the Lye Creek Burn, we're actually having a field day for sparrows. You'll be able to be walking out. They'll be looking for the rare orange sparrows with Jeremiah. We'll have the banding mist net, so you can see a Lincoln sparrow in the hand. And so just a great opportunity to learn sparrows. And so that's coming up in 2 weeks, October 11th and 12th. You can go to indianaaudubon.org to our events section, and there's a link in our chat that Whitney just provided to learn more about that. It's filling up. There's a couple spots left. And I just spent yesterday when I was talking about sparrows, I was listening to all the white throats at the Indiana Dunes, and we were setting up for Project OWLNet. And so our annual saw-whet owl migration research through Indiana. We have a collaboration of stations around the state, several that we operate and manage with Indiana Audubon, and the Indiana Dunes ones has our events live too. So if you want to learn more about joining us in October for those banding demos or one of the behind the scenes nights, we will have the nets up. Everything looks really great. The net lanes got cleared, and a half an hour ago, I pulled a tick off of me. So they're still out there. So as you're birding, put on your bug spray. There's your monthly safety alert. Let me offer that for you. But by the time I think the saw-whets are coming, that first frost comes, and it's going to be great. So there's a lot of opportunities if you want to see a saw-whet owl this season. And the last event that I'll mention we got coming up is our business membership meeting. It's an annual membership meeting that we do for the Indiana Audubon membership. You can learn about some of the updates going on, some of the grants, scholarship awards, results of the annual elections for the board of directors, and more. And so that's occurring online on October 10th. It's an evening event. And again, you can go to indianaaudubon.org/events and you can learn more about that. So that is it, I think, in my main updates I had looking out there. I did notice first thing early birding this morning, I mentioned that hurricane coming in. I see there's a lot of birders kind of getting ready, chomping at the bits down in southern Indiana, checking those ponds and wetland areas, looking for something. And I could see when I was first out, it was at sunrise, I could see this big bank of clouds to the south, kind of moving towards the north, and it was completely clear. And it was kind of cool that, here we are, way up here, and we're seeing this gigantic hurricane, this massive force come in there, and it'll be interesting to see how it affects birds. And because the birds are traveling, and if the birds aren't traveling, we're traveling the chance to see birds. And there's a lot of birds that we see here in Indiana, and I know bird watchers that are completely content, and they love Indiana, and they stay within the boundaries. They love exploring the 400 and plus species we have here. But for others, there's kind of an urge to see more, several different reasons they may do that. And so I actually got a couple friends with me today that have done some travel for birding for several reasons. Well, some for actual guiding, some for enjoyment, some just to tick off new birds. And so I do have Tina Rosier. Tina's our current treasurer at the Indiana Audubon on our board of directors. And also just in the last couple of years, you're talking about a recent birding travel enthusiast. You and your husband, Eric, get out. What can you tell us about just yourself and some of the travels that you have done?
Well, for me, I guess you could say I was a traveler before I was a birder. Eric and I just really started getting interested in avid bird watching within the last 6 or 7 years. We were actually on a 50th birthday trip to Savannah, Georgia, and that kind of sparked our interest. Went to a preserve down there, saw all kinds of birds, least bitterns, things that really kind of piqued our interest. So when we got home, we just started talking about, wow, there's got to be a lot of places that we can go to see birds. And so we just decided, since we're traveling already, it just kind of adds another perspective to your trips and to your travels. So that's how we got into travel birding.
Once you discover there's more than those 400 birds or the 700 in the United States, then I guess it's kind of, it's almost a slippery slope.
Yeah,
Once you start
absolutely.
discovering it, and there's probably no one better, I think, of that has probably captured that slippery slope and explored a lot of different places and birds than Wes Homoya, who's with us, who's done both travel on your own for fun and some guiding. And so really kind of what drives you for travel and seeing birds?
Well, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me. And hey to everybody. Yes, I succumbed to the slippery slope years ago. I was very lucky to be raised in a nature-loving family. In my foolish, youthful adolescent years, I got away from it for probably, I don't know, 15 years or so. But the last 15 years or so, I really have gotten back into it. It's actually in Hong Kong, of all places, where I picked it back up, and then went back to school and got a degree in ecology and ornithology, and have been working all sorts of various jobs since then related to birds. So consulting and surveying and guiding and conservation focuses and habitat restoration, anything out in nature that gets me outside and not behind a computer like I am right now. But anyway, so yeah, that's sort of a little bit of short, sweet version of my timeline. But yeah, anything that gets me outside and get to interact with birds and wildlife and plants and people that enjoy those things, I'm a happy guy.
Mhm. You had made a Facebook comment years ago, and I didn't prep you and tell you this, but it was about a gull. There was a gull in like Seattle or something. Was it like some sort of Galapagos type of gull that or swallow-tailed gull or
Swallowtail
anyway,
gull, if it's a rare gull from the Galapagos,
yeah,
probably
you
is
would know.
close.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was there, and then everyone was booking their flights to get to Seattle to see this gull, and you were like, "Hey, hey, hey, wait! You could do that. You could $400. You get the hotel, the rental car, and there's like 1,500 right there that you could probably just bank and go to the Galapagos and see it and all of its cousins and all of its co-patriots that are all down there." And so and that really kind of hit me as like, yeah, because part of the reason I think that we want to go see birds is the desire for lifers to see new birds, to chase endemics, and to explore more of these birds. But there's a lot of places you can go to, and so it's kind of being strategic in maximizing these great birds you can see, and not just chasing single birds around the country when there's all these locations that you can go to where it's dirt common. And it reminds me of Noah Stricker talking about traveling back during his big year to New York State, and all of his friends wanted to take him to see a brown pelican that was there, that was super rare, and he just wanted a black duck for his list that he wanted to get. And so, you've probably had the best opportunity to go out to some of these really unique endemic sites where you really need to save up to travel to see this bird, but also maybe some of the more common birds that do travel around. So, what are your favorite birding destinations?
Is it still me, or are we
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay,
you.
I
Yeah.
just want to make sure. Uh, Boy, so yeah, the favorite birding destination question is one that comes up a lot, and as frequently as what's your favorite bird? And as you other birders can attest to, I'm sure you get that question when people find out that you're a birder. So it's hard, right? Like it's maybe you don't have a favorite. Some people do, and that's great. for me, I mean, there's too many to choose from, but I feel like I have to have an answer. So when people ask me my favorite bird, I usually say the cassowary, southern cassowary. And that kind of goes with my answer for favorite birding destination. I don't really have a favorite. They're all special to me in their own ways. You know, it's like
Mhm.
picking your favorite kid or something. But I usually say Australia, partly because of the cassowaries there, but also because there's an abundance of wildlife that you can see fairly readily. So, and not just birds, the mammals and herps, reptiles and amphibians. There's, you know, parrots flying around all over the place, and there's kangaroos and wallabies hopping around all over the place, and some neat snakes and a lot of neat lizards, monitors, and bearded dragons and things like that. So, if I have to pick one, that's what I say. But they're all special in their own way.
Uh-huh. Given the remoteness of Australia, is that a place that has a higher number of endemics?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You know, huge. It's a huge island, right? So, any island's going to have some endemics, and if you got a huge island, you're going to have a lot of endemics. So, yeah, that's part of it too. Is there's not a whole lot of overlap with even the commonplace stuff that you'll see throughout the day with what we have back here in the States. So, a lot of new stuff and a lot of weird stuff. You know, Australia's pretty famous. People think it's scary. They think there's a lot of scary big things that are going to bite you and sting you and eat you.
Snakes.
But that's not hasn't been my experience. There's just a lot of weird stuff to look at and enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Tina, where's your favorite destination?
So my experiences aren't as vast as Wes's, since I've only been birding 6 years, but I would say probably my in United States location would probably be Southeast Arizona, simply
Okay.
because of the diversity of hummingbirds, and I just love hummingbirds. And of course, in Indiana, we're stuck with one, usually.
Mhm.
And then internationally, I've taken 3 trips so far, and my favorite is probably Ecuador. And I was telling you earlier, Brad, probably the reason is just because of the vast differences of the habitats that we were in. We stayed in a remarkable lodge, El Dorado. I think that was in the Santa Marta Mountains. And just the experience of going and standing up on top of the Andes after and celebrating seeing the sea snipe that, Juan kept saying, now there's no guarantees, it might be foggy. And, just the big celebration that we had after seeing that bird was probably one of my most memorable experiences. So
Yeah, in fact,
Ecuador, I'd have to say.
I think I got, let me see if this will share this. I think this is us
Yep.
actually in Ecuador right there. And so this is like
Yep.
about
That was right after
14,000
we saw
feet
the
up.
sea snipe and we're celebrating, and uh,
No, there's a
it
nice
was a
there
great
picture of you guys.
destination. Yep.
And I believe that was also, let me see if I have, yeah, this video.
Is that the
Actually, you know what?
one? Oh, yeah,
Yeah, you know that one? Actually,
I
let me,
do.
I just want to make sure that, yeah, I want to share the sound that's on for that. So, and yeah, so I think shortly after I saw the seed sniper coming down that Papalacta Pass, again, 14,000 feet, and great eyes of Nelson and Juan spotted it.
What is it? Congo!
A lot of happy birders.
Shoot it!
And of course, just, the other reason we haven't really even touched on yet, but just look at that, the landscapes and the beauty of the places that we're out there visiting. In addition to that, you mentioned Ecuador's culture. It's, the people that you interact with. So it's just kind of very interesting, all of those reasons that we might travel and see birds. I don't think if you're looking at first time travel, you're probably going to jump right into Australia or New Zealand for birding. So both of you guys, starting with Wes, what would you say would be like the best first destination if you're wanting to leave international? You've been to Arizona, maybe Texas, and you're looking to do that first birding trip with a passport. What would you recommend?
Yeah, Australia is a bit of an investment, both time and money. It's a couple days to get out there and a couple days to get back and halfway across the world. So for some people, that's a bucket list place, and they want to go there. But yeah, if you're looking for something maybe a little cheaper, a little shorter trip, which does can make the travel experience a little easier. Obviously, for us, staying in the Americas, and keeping close to the same time zone also can make things a little easier. Sometimes, sometimes it's about the infrastructure. More areas with developed ecotourism infrastructure. So Costa Rica is a classic one you hear mentioned a lot. But Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Honduras, all these places by now have caught up to Costa Rica, and there's some areas in every country that are a little more challenging. So you want to look at the itinerary, but I think anywhere there in Central South America, Caribbean, those are, places you can travel to in a day. You can make it there in a couple of flights, or maybe one flight if you're blessed to live next to a big international airport, maybe you Chicagoans. But yeah, and not break the bank, maybe do a week and a half trip and not feel super rushed. So Trinidad and Tobago is another one we do. Cuba obviously is very close, a fun one that I do, one that I did for Indiana Audubon before, and that's one I really enjoy. There's some great experiences there, especially for folks that maybe aren't sure they want to go on a full-on hardcore birding trip. They want to do a lot of birding, but want to do some other stuff too. So the Cuba trip is one of our most rounded trips that I do. Itineraries where there's some visit some museums, Bay of Pigs Museum and little Havana city tour. Do a little snorkeling, little beach time. So those are all good ones, and it's not too overwhelming as well. That one, there's 30 endemic species that we target, and 100, maybe 150 birds we see throughout the whole trip. Some of these Andes ones, they're amazing because you see all these different habitats, but sometimes new folks feel a little overwhelmed with having to keep track of 400, 500 new birds on their list. So some people like that, but anyways, if you're looking for something a little more approachable, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. Is I hadn't really thought of Cuba as maybe kind of an intro one, but a lot of those Caribbean islands with some smaller numbers, not as overwhelming. Yet you still have an opportunity to be introduced to plenty of lifers or new bird families or species.
Yep.
Tina, where would you send someone their first shot?
Well, I mean, I was going to say Costa Rica as well, but I do think that Wes brings up a good point. I mean, I think that when we went, we had over 400 lifers, and we did do some, pre-trip studying and preparation, to recognize new families and so forth. And it was pretty overwhelming. I don't have a lot of experience going to other places other than Costa Rica, Colombia, and Ecuador. So I agree with what Wes said, and I would definitely be interested in looking into some of those trips. I know Cuba is somewhere that my husband has really wanted to go. Our bucket list is very long, but that's definitely one that we have on our radar as well.
You get some really kind of cool, unique birds, like the smallest bird of the world, the little bee hummingbird. But then as you start head down there, I can think of right away. There's a couple cool families that you're not going to see in Indiana. Trogons, toadies are good examples. So as you guys have traveled, do you guys have any kind of like these are like cool families of birds that we don't get at home that I really like to see when I'm out traveling that have been new to you the last couple of years?
Oh yeah,
Tina, how
for
about
sure.
you?
I think obviously the toucans, the toucanettes, very impressive birds when you see them. Jacamars are great birds, cock of the rock. There's just so many to pull from. Even tanagers, we get a couple tanagers in Indiana, but when you see the diversity of tanagers and all the colors and patterns and names, whether it's gold necked, gold cheeked, gold face, gold it's very overwhelming. But tanagers is probably one of my favorite families of birds.
Favorites for you, Wes?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, obviously, everything Tina said, definitely agree with. Those neotropical tanagers, a lot of times I see compared to our warblers. They're kind of these small, bejeweled songbirds that people really get riled up about. But for me, I wanted to mention, I guess, the antbirds.
Oh,
As
yeah.
you get down into Central South America, Caribbean, the neotropics.
For sure.
It's this huge family with names that sound familiar, but they're not related. So you hear about ant wrens and ant vireos and ant shrikes and all these things that were named because they look somewhat superficially similar to birds we might know, but they're totally different. So, but they're really neat, and especially the ecology. I think one of the biggest things for me going birding in the tropics is looking for these mixed flocks, whether it's arboreal or terrestrial, following ant swarms. To me, that's my biggest thrill, I think, in birding is getting onto one of these mixed flocks, and then it's a little chaotic, especially if you're with a group and trying to get everybody onto every bird, but
Right.
they can have, a couple dozen different species all just in this one little group moving through the forest together as a little foraging posse. And so that's a big thing I enjoy. Also, these you can see some birds that are in their own family or even in their own order. So some pretty unique things. And if you're somebody that likes getting new bird families, sunbittern or oilbird or Hawatson, even that's one that's even in its own order. It's so bizarre. So
Uh-huh.
those
Wow.
are always fun ones to tick off.
I guess it's not just bird species, but I realize you're referring to like bird behaviors and things that you're going to see in these locations you don't see back at home. So right away at the top of my mind, I thought like orapindolas throwing themselves off as they're calling in Costa Rica. But the whole ant bird, ant shrike, ant tanagers, the whole like relationship, if you bird the tropics with ants. And when you're a bird in the woods in Indiana, you don't look for the ants to try to find the birds. And the idea of what a mixed flock is for us, for migrants following chickadees right now, is still not anything like what these are. Wes, can you kind of explain more like why the ant is actually important for birding for anyone that's going to these tropical areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, you'll often see them crossing trails that you're walking through in the forest, and so that's one of the first lessons you learn is to watch where you're standing on the
Absolutely.
trail. Tina can
Don't
attest
get
to that.
bit.
Yeah. Okay.
These
Yeah.
ants
Real.
are a force, right? They're just
Yeah.
marching through the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people have seen at least probably leafcutter ants or videos of them, and so that gives you an idea of kind of this procession. But it's these some of these other ants like army ants
Army
that
ants.
are storming through the woods. On a it looks like a small scale maybe to our eyes, but as they're moving through, they're wreaking havoc to the critters of the forest floor. So whether it's other insects or small lizards or frogs or things like that, they do not want to be anywhere near these swarms. So as these swarms move through, they kind of kick up and flush some of these other small creatures that are on the ground or near the ground. And these ant birds have learned to follow these swarms, and they're not actually eating the ants; they're eating the other creatures that are getting kicked up and flushed up from the swarm. And so it's a very clever uh, mutualist situation going on here, and evolutionary adaptation going on together. So it's pretty neat to witness.
Those guides are in those areas. They're basically, find the ant swarm, right? Find the ant swarms, and then you'll find the birds that are following those, and then the birds that are following those birds as well.
Yep.
And honestly, I just learned something myself. So it was very interesting hearing Wes kind of explain how that happened and why it happened. I mean, I always knew that the guides were looking for ants, and I just assumed that the birds ate the ants. So thanks for sharing that.
like
Pleasure.
terror going on out there. And we had one night with Juan Diego. Where was that? Was that in Ecuador? We were looking for a screech owl, like a foothill screech owl or something, and we were hearing it, but it was thick in the bush, and it was just calling on its own repeatedly, 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 and just that patience. Okay, maybe it'll eventually move, and we'll get some eyes on it. And we're waiting and waiting, and it was like a last minute thing. We left after dinner. It was the one night I put the sandals on instead of shoes, and standing in the road in the dark, and everyone else had kind of wandered off, and suddenly it's like on there, and I turned on the light, and I'm just surrounded by all these ants, and I go running out of there, and I'm slapping my feet, and everyone's laughing at me, and no more than like 3 minutes later, like they're wandering into where those ants were, and I'm tiptoeing, and I'm looking, where, and they're gone. There's not a single ant, and just the whole swarm had moved through, and that just like that. It was so interesting and painful at the same time. I got some photos that you guys had sent. I want to share a couple of these, and because this isn't necessarily like a new family, but I don't see birds like this in Indiana. I think Wes, you sent this.
Yeah.
What the heck is this?
That's beautiful.
That is a cream-colored woodpecker. I've heard people joke about it being mustard and ketchup woodpecker, or maybe banana and cherry. But yeah, cream-colored woodpecker. It's got a fairly broad range throughout Amazonia and surrounding regions in northwestern South America. But it's just one of my, I think birds that people are kind of shocked when they are flipping through their field guide, getting ready to go on a trip that's in the range of this species. My mother in particular is a big woodpecker fan, so this is on the top of her bucket list. But yeah,
And where was this one photographed?
that one was from Guyana.
Guyana. Okay. There was this one too. I saw you sent.
Yeah, keeping on theme, chestnut woodpecker. Oh gosh, where was that one? Oh, thank you. I'm glad I labeled my photo. Yes.
Did you?
Chestnut. Oh, excuse me, chestnut colored woodpecker.
Chestnut
There
color.
is a chestnut woodpecker and there's a chestnut colored woodpecker, and they're very similar looking. So I forgot. Yeah, chestnut colored woodpecker.
This was in Honduras.
Yeah.
And then you had what's this?
Oh, that's
not a bird.
Yeah, it's not a bird. It's not always about the birds. Although, that's always the primary focus of every tour or birding adventure I do. At least for me and my groups, we do like to stop and look at some of the other things. So yeah, this is a Amazonian horned frog, or you may have heard it called a Pac-Man frog if you've seen them in pet stores or whatever. But yep,
bit in a while.
Big old mouth. This is just a real tiny one. This was like the size of a quarter or maybe a $50. So
how can you not? You're in these places. You're going to see some amazing other wildlife and not just animals, but insects, frogs that you got to look at, or amazing sights. Like, geez, Louise, is it going to load? It's going to load for us. Maybe.
Thinking about it
again. Thinking about it. This again. Where'd it go?
There we go.
Tell me about this. You sent this photo in.
Yeah, so this is Kaitour Falls. It's also in Guyana. We actually hire a little puddle jumper to take us from Georgetown up to the falls, and then from there we go down to the rainforest. But during our time up there, that's literally, you can see the ledge there of where you can very easily step off
standing right there
if you want. It's not like Niagara. I mean, the first time I was up there, I was shocked that there was no railing like Niagara Falls or whatever. But they let you get right up to the ledge if you want. So, but anyways, it's to many consider it's the most impressive waterfall in the world. It is the largest single drop waterfall by volume. So It's not as tall as some of the others, like
Mm.
Victoria Falls or whatever, but I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
definitely. Let's do one or two more here. We got, what's this?
That's Pinky. That's
Pinky.
Pinky in the Brain. No, this is a pink-headed warbler from Guatemala.
Okay.
It's one of Guatemala's most popular and beloved and sought after birds.
Okay.
So,
Non-migratory, like our warblers.
correct. Yeah, you got to travel for this one. You got to go down there.
Okay. Okay. And then this.
This little guy is a wine-throated hummingbird and showing off its lovely gorget there. And this is a little video of wine-throated hummingbird. This is also in Guatemala. Um, just one of the cutest little birds out there. And man, showing that gorget like that was unforgettable.
Kind of reminds me of those wood stars as well. Is it a small one?
Yep. Yeah, it's probably 3 inches, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned the hummingbirds in our our family discussion, because we obviously have hummingbirds here, but the diversity of the hummingbirds outside of the United States is also very overwhelming, and one of my favorite families as well.
I think I was never as interested in hummingbirds until I traveled.
Right.
I guess our little ruby-throated just wasn't enough to really kind of get me fascinated with them. But once you
Right.
start seeing these in the tropics, I'd heard that at places like this, I think you sent this photo, Tina. I think you took this. This in the Santa Martas in Colombia.
Yes, I did. And I misspoke earlier in the presentation about this location being in Ecuador, but yes, obviously it's in Colombia. A wonderful reserve that we stayed at. I distinctly remember, standing on that platform doing a hawk watch one afternoon. Just the views were incredible. You could look one way and see the Caribbean. You could look one way and see the mountains. And Brad, I think I didn't send the picture in, but you took a lovely picture of the Milky Way from that platform.
Oh,
And
yeah. Uh-huh.
some
And here's how you got up there
wonderful.
too, right?
Oh, yeah. So, it was obviously at the top of the mountain, and we got to ride in this interesting vehicle. And what you can't see in that picture is it's just a little motorcycle
Back up there.
pulling us up this huge mountain. And it was a very memorable experience for sure.
Mhm. This biodiversity explosion area, you got Colombia, Ecuador, up into Central America. I'd heard that in these kind of countries, like you got 1,200, 1,600 birds, they're all over 1,000 species recorded. And a third of all these birds are either the hummingbirds, tanagers, or flycatchers, make up a third of them. So just all the speciation and diversity you get there creates for not only really cool birds, but some really memorable experiences. What's this?
Oh my goodness. I don't know the type of spider, maybe Wes does, but I know that was one of our dinner guests in Colombia. And it was just had everybody excited in one way or another.
Definitely a tarantula of some sort, but I
It's
wouldn't be able
definitely
to tell
tarantula.
you which
Correct.
species without
But
looking at
maybe
it.
that's not the pros to actually traveling out there. Obviously, there's a good pro is trying a lot of different foods.
Oh yeah, a
right?
lot of different food. We were at the equator there. I think that was on one of our last days
An empanada.
of our Ecuador trip, eating an empanada. Yeah, it was pretty exciting, pretty fun.
Oh,
Looks familiar. Was that at the center of the world?
Yep, center of the world. Yep.
Center of the
Other
mundo?
ones.
Yep, I know the spot.
These amazing birds. Remember that bird, Tina? I think you brought that photo.
I do remember seeing that at the same location where we saw the giant ant pitta. Maybe Wes, or you can remind me of the species, but just at that particular location, getting up and close and personal with some of those birds was just a great experience.
There's one of the wood quails that was on the La Paz Reserve.
Giant
Yeah,
ant pitta.
definitely a wood quail. I was trying to remember if it's rufous breasted or something like that. But
Something, yeah. Those are your giant ant pita. that
Yep.
folks travel to see, Maria, right? And then, of course, yeah, the cock of the rock that you guys had referenced earlier. Just you're not going to see that kind of bird in Indiana. Would you
Right.
two say you've had a favorite or most memorable bird moment that really kind of you remember now, going back and even after you've come back?
I mean, I've already mentioned a few, but probably, I guess the first most memorable experience of my first trip in Costa Rica was the resplendent quetzal. And really just because it was our first international trip, it was probably our primary target bird just because it's such an amazing bird. And then when Juan Diego located it, he kind of whispered to people because he knew how much I wanted to see the bird. And so they were keeping it a secret from me, and they were like, go see what Juan has, go see what Juan has. So when I looked in the scope and saw it, I kind of had an emotional not breakdown, but just an emotional event because it was such a neat bird to see and kind of just what I had expected. So probably one of the most memorable.
Side of emotions there.
Yeah.
Wes, did you?
Even thinking about it makes me emotional.
That's awesome. Well, I'll kind of to tie into that first, and then I'll say one more. But obviously, there's plenty to choose from as you get out there and spend time in these places with these birds. But you're talking about emotional moments. I've had plenty of people that have teared up a little bit when seeing a certain bird or other kind of wildlife, and that's to me some of the most memorable and special moments. So
Right.
what comes to mind for me recently, a lot of people may know my parents, my folks often will travel with me on some of these trips. They do about one trip a year with me out of the handful that I do. But in Belize earlier this year, there was a species of woodpecker, again, woodpeckers, but called pale-billed woodpecker. And it's kind of like our pileated.
Mhm.
But you guys all know ivory-billed woodpeckers and all the sad history of that species. But this pale-billed woodpecker has a vocalization, a knock vocalization. It's a double knock that sounds almost identical to what we know that the ivory-bills used to sound like.
Mhm.
And out of all the crazy birds and that colorful things and interesting things we saw and heard, that remains to this day my dad's most poignant memory from that trip, is hearing that sound and kind of being transported into that feeling and emotion of maybe what it was like to hear an ivory bill. And so we still mention that every once in a while and get a little bit emotional about that every once in a while. So sometimes it's not even what you saw, it's what you heard and who you saw it or heard it with.
Right.
Mhm.
But for me, the big one for my last trip I just did in Guyana was finally seeing a harpy eagle. And it was at a nest. And so it was, really good long looks at it. For many birders, that's the way they see a harpy eagle encounter one, is once somebody knows where a nest is, then you can kind of track it down. It's a pretty tough bird to see otherwise, but
Mhm.
so that had been kind of a nemesis bird for me. So I was really happy to finally get to see that one.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats. And usually that walk to see it is like 6 hours through several miles of rainforest to get to where that
Yeah,
nest is, right?
yeah, they don't usually nest right in the city on a power, a power line or whatever, like bald eagle or osprey or something. They for many folks
So
and for
harpy pole.
yeah, no harpy pole. So for us, we had to hike. We had to drive a couple miles from the lodge we were at, and then hike a couple miles, and then take a boat with a couple guys down the river for a few miles, and then hike a little bit more, and then. But they had this amazing, spot where we could view this nest from right across the river. They'd even like built a picnic table from where we could eat and watch from at our leisure. So it was really lovely.
Great. You guys keep talking about the emotions that get tied to a lot of these memorable events, and that brought back a memory right away for me. Is a couple of years ago, Jen and I joined the IES Duluth Zach Sim Bog Tour, and it was led by Sherry McCullough and Sam Warren, and we had a pretty big group that year, and we were kind of split up into two caravans that were driving around Zach Sim Bog, and we did some birding Friday night, and we spent all day Saturday birding the bog, and we saw hawk owls and the winter finches, and through all of Saturday and even into the evening hours. So the one thing that we couldn't find was the great gray owl, the one everybody goes to the bog to see, and we were there. It was a holiday weekend, so we actually had all of Sunday, and so we were birding all of Sunday, and still no owls. Nobody was even reporting that they were seeing them, and it was finally like down to like literally like 5 p.m. on that Sunday. We're going back to the hotel in Duluth, and we're just going to go home. And it actually, the sun had set, and now we were like 15 minutes after sunset. And I remember just catching a glimpse, like a quarter mile down away, this glimpse of something just kind of moving. And it was like this gray ghost. And in this growing darkness, it was kind of moving eventually closer and closer to everybody. And by then, like, they had heard that there may have been an owl. And so all these cars were pulling up on the side of the road. And I looked behind me, and there's like 15 cars, and like every birder in the bog had gotten word that maybe the owl was going to be there. And he finally came within like 100 feet of the road and flew up into a pine tree. And everybody is just silent. And you look around, and everybody was crying, and it was such an emotional moment. They were waiting all weekend to try to find this. It was a magic, amazing bird. And even I looked over at my wife, who was not a bird watcher, and she's crying and kind of understanding, that moment and why everybody was there and why people travel to see birds. And I think that great gray owl for that trip really kind of captured the reasons that people travel to see birds, and create one of those memorable experiences, like the harpy eagle or the quetzal that you're going to see. And so every location has those, and it's hard to come up with just the first one. There's probably like second place birds that you guys have in the top of your mind as well. So any other real memorable ones that come to mind real quick? That was your big
Other
ones.
than the ones we've already kind of mentioned, the Andean condor was big, the seed
Oh, yeah.
snipe. I mean, really on these trips, almost every trip, you're going to have some bird where the crowd, the group that you're with just explodes in a cheer, and it's emotional. So that's part of the fun of birding and making friends, and, some of the fellowship with the birders that you meet. Sometimes you bird with people sometimes you bird with people you don't know, but you get to know them, and then they become friends, and that's part of the joy of the birding community, I think.
So Tina, would you give advice to somebody they're wanting to do their first birding trip, whether it's domestic or international? What would you have any sage advice?
I wouldn't say sage advice, but beginner
I was going to say
advice.
sage thrasher advice. But
As a beginner, I would say just talk to others, do like what you're doing now, listening to people that have traveled, talk about their experiences, kind of what to do, what not to do. I think one of the big things I would probably do is take a shorter trip, maybe a US trip, a 3 or 4 day trip, maybe to Grayling, the Kirtland's Warbler trip. We didn't even talk about that. That was a very memorable experience. So see how you like traveling with other birders. It's important to be a team player and get along with others, go with the flow. Some people don't like birding with groups, and some do. So I think just starting out small is something I would do before you decide to take a 2-week trip with people you don't know.
What's your advice?
All good advice. For me, some of the best advice I can give is to look at beyond. I mean, obviously, you want to look at the price, the dates, locations, the itinerary, that sort of thing. But look at what's included in the price. Some companies will not include as much as others. So there's some little hidden expenses that may pop up. But and look at and ask them, how they run their tours, and look at the lot at where they stay. So some places can maybe cut corners in the lodging, stay at some places that aren't as nice or comfortable, or are, corporate little chain hotels or whatever, versus staying at lodges that are managed and owned and staffed by the local community. That's kind of the biggest thing for me is looking at their model. Is it supporting local people and the and habitat? Is it mindful about where you're staying? Are you working with local guides throughout the trip, or are that people, that's the biggest thing with these trips, beyond having fun, is supporting that ecotourism model and giving people that live there a reason to not clear those woods for cattle or agriculture. They need to see, they care about their home and their land, but they need to have a way to make a living and keep those things intact. So it does matter. It's like voting with your dollars, right? You can have fun, but how you have fun can make a difference. And I think we all, as birders, we want what's best for the birds and their habitat. So looking at
Yeah,
those things is really important.
I think it's a very good point. Is there's so many conservation issues that are going on in a lot of the places that we're traveling to, and so one of the things that we do in Indiana Audubon trips is find ways to the Mumford and Keller that everywhere we go, we kind of support conservation or research or education that's going on the ground. And you bring up a good point, is by highlighting these birds, and maybe they don't release cattle or cut a woodlot, that's showing a lot of these communities maybe a source of revenue that they hadn't considered, where tourism may come into play. And what greater example is, La Paz's with Maria and the ant pitas and the cock of the rocks, and how much that's grown. And now through the GoFundMe's, I think has got actual nonprofit status and have an actual preserve that's been purchased. And that's just because of birders. They're out traveling. So there's countless examples of that. And in Colombia, the Indiana Audubon's Mumford donation helped support Alas para Futuro, which is a young birding club. And so it's teaching kids the birding as a hobby, and then being able to use that as a possible career option for these kids going down the road as an option too. So that's further helping support the economies of these areas that are hosting bird watchers. So yeah, we hadn't talked about just kind of the added advantages. And if you're with an organization, trips you can look at all those in the itinerary. A big basic one we often do is just take the price divided by number of days, so you can start kind of comparing. But then there's so much more complicated looking at what the amenities and services in each of those trips are. So yeah, all good advice for folks that are looking to it. Maybe start smaller, do a US based one. Go visit. You mentioned Southeast Arizona. Where else in the U.S. would you say would be good areas for folks that don't want to travel internationally right away? Both Wes and then Tina.
Well, I was just going to say the most recent trip to California, following it on Facebook, that's definitely up there on my list. I haven't done much birding in the Western United States, so that's definitely up there, and doing a couple pelagics out there as well. So
That
trip
was a
amazing.
great trip. Yeah, they just did in California, where they were on the boat, and this little video that Amy Kearns had about just being like literally like feet away from an albatross, just sitting out on the water.
You got albatross.
So I got to see a lot of great birds, right there in the U.S. too. So oftentimes it can help bring the price down for folks that are wanting to do their first trip. Really cool.
Well, and just to make a plug for the South Dakota trip coming up, Eric and I just went birding in South Dakota, Mount Rushmore area, Black Hills, in June. And Libby and I have a trip coming up in the coming year in June of 25. So that'll be a great trip as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, a little taste of some of the Western birds that are there. What if you're looking to kind of travel on your own and see birds? I know domestically, it's a lot easier now to go birding in other states because of eBird. You can kind of look
Right.
up records and I can go birding. A lot of times, if I'm landing in Costa Rica or Panama, it's a little more harder. Maybe language barriers, logistics, where the birds are. It's good to get a local guide. If you were to travel west to like Costa Rica or Guatemala and you're not in a big tour, what would you do?
Um, you can certainly reach out to your network, people like us here. I think that's invaluable to get information directly from people you know and trust. But after that, obviously do your research online. There's some nice communities, at least on Facebook. There's some birding travel, and um, pretty much if you just look up birds or birding and pick your country, you'll probably be able to find a birding group. Those are good networks as well to use. One thing, if even if you are thinking about birding on your own, something I would recommend folks consider is hiring at least a local guide for one day at the beginning of your trip.
Yep.
Because even if you don't want to necessarily, or you can't afford a guide for your whole trip, if you could even just get a local guide for a day, especially at the beginning of your trip, then that can give you a really nice base to build off of for the rest of your trip. You'll learn so much even in just that one day that it's really going to improve your experience the rest of the trip. And usually they're more than happy to give you some tips about what to look out for, where to go on the rest of your trip when you're by yourself. So I think definitely consider that. I know there's Birding Pal is a resource I know a lot of folks
Website.
have used over the years. But if I'm more just me myself, I'm happy even in places where I don't guide or don't live. I know that me and James Adams, my boss and Natural Selections Tours, like even if we're not able to take you or guide you in a certain area, we know a lot of people from those areas, so we're more than happy to connect you with folks that we know. And I think a lot of guides and birders, international birders, are also happy to do that too. So that's something to consider as well.
Sure. Yeah. As we were talking about some of these destinations, I remembered a previous thought is we've been mentioning a lot of these tropical zones kind of south of here. And I think there's one of the other reasons for that is just the ease of travel. So for us to be able to get around, if you're crossing time zones and, going to Australia, Asia, Europe, it's a lot more difficult. Not only does the price increase, but then you're dealing with some of the time zone changes. And so you may have to build in more time to be able to get some of these areas where if you're going to Guatemala or Costa Rica, you're literally like in the same time zone. And so it becomes a lot easier to get to those areas and still see a lot of birds. And so I think that's why we talk a lot about the Caribbean and Central and Northern South America, because of that ease of travel to those locations too. That kind of goes, doesn't get mentioned a lot when you start looking into going to Thailand and realize how much more time you need, where you can't do a little short getaway to there for the weekend and come back.
Right.
As we kind of finish up here, I have one other question for you guys, and that is, as I get back, and I think I learn lessons from every trip that I carry with me. And so as you guys have traveled, what's the most valuable lesson or insight that you could pass on to others that are starting some birding travel and to explore these different areas and the different birds that we have? Do you want
I think I already mentioned just kind of the being a team player thing. I think that traveling with a group, you kind of have to have the I am third mentality as far as, trying to help everybody have the best experience they can have. Going with the flow, being flexible. I think one thing also that helped me is doing some pre-trip preparation. There's bird quizzes and eBird. There's Brad started groups for a lot of the IAS trips in which we will share photographs beforehand and quiz each other on birds, because I mean, yes, the guide's going to be there to identify all the birds, but I think to make it more memorable for yourself, you really need to have some familiarity with the birds and the families so that you can bring back the memories and experiences with you. And then I think Wes might have touched on like accommodations. I think going into some of the international trips, the best thing to do is not expect 5-star accommodations. We've been in some 1-star, we've been in some 5-star, and you just gotta roll with it and realize it's only going to be a day or two and you're there for the birds, not for the accommodations. So that's just some of my takeaways from some of my early trips.
You want the comforts of the United States, stay in the United States, right?
Yeah, and I think, just to kind of touch on learning about the people and the culture that you mentioned earlier, Brad, and giving back to the culture. I mean, some of the most memorable experiences we've had have actually been, meeting with individual families on their farms and learning about their land and the history and how the preserve came to be what it is today. And I always leave there appreciating them and appreciating their, I guess, time that they took to educate us, and then also leaving the country. If you can leave the country, because we did have a bit of an experience in Ecuador getting out of the country, but that's a whole nother story. Leaving the country and getting back to the United States just really makes you appreciate and realize how blessed we are to live in the country we do. So
Yeah, definitely. Any other lessons or insights from US?
Oh, plenty. But I see we're a couple minutes away from closing time. Life is short. Go out and see the world while you can.
There you go.
I mean, you guys may say I've seen a lot, and I am very lucky to have seen as much as I have, but there's still so much out there. I feel like I've only touched the surface. So it's like Pringles. Once you pop, you can't stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's really it. I don't know. I don't really understand people that don't want to go travel and see all that's out there.
Helps, yeah, expand the mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Connections,
So
personal growth.
that's it really. I don't know if you were going to get to it, but real quick, just shameless plug. I do lead
Yeah,
locally.
right now.
Feathers and fermentation. Oh, well,
Oh,
yes.
yeah,
Internationally,
feathers,
I
yeah,
lead trips for
feathers.
national collections tours. I know we want to talk about Indiana Audubon tour, so I didn't want to get too much into the biz. But for IAS and other folks, I do local feathers and fermentation tours quarterly, where we raise money for Indiana Audubon and local nonprofits, and do some birding and have some libations. So check those out too if you're interested.
Yeah, lots of different forms of travel just right here in the state as well. So I think the one thing that I have brought back from my travel is learning two things. One is expect the unexpected. It'll always happen. You get all kinds of stuff that you might not expect in the US, what might happen in other places. The other thing was patience, just learning patience and getting patience. And I noticed it right away, because as soon as I get back from a trip, I find myself standing in the line to the grocery store, and I'm not all worked up that there's a big line. And then 2 weeks later, I'm back to normal, and I'm annoyed again that there's a line at Meijer. But patience is one that I've definitely learned traveling. And if you have that, then things will go a lot smoother for you. And so many different opportunities for travel, whether you're on a state trip, your feathers or fermentation, you're at one of the Indiana Audubon bird hotspot locations that we have some of our local trips, or our list of upcoming ones that we got coming up, including Duluth in February. We have the Badlands and Black Hills that Tina mentioned with Tina and Libby in June. We have Northern Peru in 25. And in February 2026, we'll be back to Costa Rica with Lifer Nature Tours as well. So a lot of different options, both locally and abroad, if you want to explore them. And when you do that, through Indiana Audubon, you're supporting our mission, our conservation, education, research. So the funds that you put in our trip goes back to many of our programs too. So we'd love to have you along on any of our travel. There's tons of joy with it. So I want to thank Tina and Wes for joining us to talk about some of those joys, and we hope to see you out on the trail here sometime soon. So with that, thanks for joining us this month of the Hoosier Birders Hour. We'll see you again next month for another topic. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.